If you smell what the Niners are cooking, woo!
I spent my whole life chasing the bag and running from coppers. And a nigga been drowning myself in these codeine problems, yeah. Spent a couple thousand on my feet and running back up in a week, yeah. I got these Jordans on my feet till it get bloody underneath, yeah. Wanna feel the saber till it's buzzing on my jeans, dog. Cash rules everything around me, dog, yeah. I remember I was having no money, now I'm the richest in the yacht, shit. I had to take the safe up by the wall and put the faces in my pocket. I ain't even had no gas, I had to pursue the duffel, yeah. While I'm in the trenches, I did everything for the profits. I wanna pull up to the hood, dead flies, fuck red guts in the mouth. All my brothers gotta eat, and if I got a full plate, he know that he got it. I ain't even got a plug, nigga had to run it up, turn it to the socket. Had to go and run the play, niggas know that I'm the wave like I'm a tsunami. If a nigga want it all, I gotta be my own ball like I'm John Gotti. A nigga can't play me out of my position, I just might fuck around and catch a body. See me.
A good leader has to spot the talented resources, the best people to do the different jobs and the right products, the right direction to go. So he was the direction setter, and he just knew that I was the best at what I did.
How did the competition look at Apple? Did they take you seriously? What happened when you first got started?
We had no savings accounts. We had no relatives or friends that could loan us money. We just had this drive. We wanted to build this computer, wanted to find a way to sell it. You got to believe that you've got the talent inside. You got to believe it, not just pretend it. I type something else into memory, a yellow dot pops up. I called Steve Jobs over, and that was a eureka moment. We were shaking. This is so big.
To become,
got to have somebody, at least in the company, that has incredible drive. Just, absolutely determined that, you're onto something big, and we got to keep moving to get there. And just about everybody in Apple was that way. I grew up so advanced in electronics and computers that I couldn't afford anything, had no money, but I could design any computer there in the world in just a couple of days. And I just did it for fun. It was a hobby, and I wanted my own computer. I told my dad at one point, someday I'm gonna have this particular computer of my own. And he said, how are you gonna do that? It costs as much as a house. And I was sort of stunned because I was young. And I said, well, I'll live in an apartment. So I would rather have a computer of my own that I can just write programs on, even if it's just to play a game, just to solve a chess problem. And eventually what happened was, I had a lot of luck doing some extremely exotic design things. I got into the early stages of arcade games, designing games like Breakout for Atari. And I just did that on the side. And I was working for Hewlett-Packard, designing the hottest gadget product in the world. The HP scientific calculators changed the world. Within about 5 years, there were no more slide rules sold. Every engineer, every scientist had to have one of these HP calculators. And I got to design them. I had no college degree, but they interviewed me, and I knew so much about it all that they hired me anyway. And while I was doing that, I was designing all sorts of little projects, the video games and terminals that I could talk to computers across the country. And finally, I realized the formula, the day had come when you could buy low enough cost memory chips, low enough microprocessors that did enough. I figured out in my head the formula to building an affordable computer. And I said, wow, this is what I've wanted for 10 years. I've got it. I'm here. 5 years before Apple even, we met because I had designed one computer and some executive gave me some chips to build it. And I was building it at a friend's house, and the friend introduced me to Steve. He said, both of you guys know digital electronics. So Steve came over and described projects he did at Hewlett-Packard, building frequency counters that had displays of digits, counting frequencies of things like guitar chords or whatever. And I told him what I had done, all my experience, and I was sort of like the top young designer you could ever run into in the times. And Steve was a leader. He was always trying to be one of those special few people in the world, the few that take the steps forward, and a Newton. He spoke of Newton and Shakespeare and things like that. And I know that he really wanted to be one of those people, but he wanted to find formulas to find a company and sell things. So every time I designed something really cute, Steve would come by and say, I know how we can sell it. So we were always a partnership, selling my little projects. But the whole hardware, I wrote the computer programming languages. I did every single bit of the whole computer. Not for a company. I did it because I wanted it myself. If you can convince somebody to want something inside for their own personal reason, they really see something that they want to do and they really feel it in their heart. That's when you get a lot more done than you can't motivate people with a high enough salary to do what you'll do when it's for your own self or to show off even. need some backgrounds of, let's call it education training. You do need those elements, but a person who knows how to take the little elements and build on them and formulate, write the book of how you actually put them into play. A person who comes up with the ability to write the book, I think is better than someone who knows how to do it from past experience. Because everything I did at Apple that was an A+ job and that took us places, I had two things in my favor. A, I had no money. That meant I had to figure out ways to do things very inexpensively. I had to get a lot out for the least in. And B, and I was very good at that. And B, I'd never done them before. Every single Apple project, computers, hard disks, everything, I had never designed those things ever in my life. I had had no training in them, but I was so good at taking the little parts, like pieces of wood, to build a building, that I could architect something that was perfect and really better than people that were used to doing it would do. If I had had experience, I would have designed things with 50 chips instead of 8 chips. Technology was created in 1986, I think, and the president, Ronald Reagan, gave the awards to me and Steve Jobs. We're in the first set of recipients. Because Apple was, really doing a lot of good for the world then, and the economy. That always helps a president. But Ronald Reagan was one of the early presidents that they all speak out. We got to have more emphasis on technology, on innovation. And to me, I thought, wow, they're going to have more math classes and science classes in schools. It's never happened. There's a lot of talk everywhere, but it's very hard. It'll get translated into a couple little projects that are nowhere near what you ever hear of. Intelligence in our schools is defined as always having the same answer as everyone else. You go home, you watch the same news show, you come back and talk about current events, you all say the same thing. And not one person says, no, that doesn't make sense to me. Not one person is really taught to think for themselves, or that's called not intelligence. We're taught how to calculate when two canoes will meet on a river. The river's flowing 5 miles an hour. We should teach kids to raise their hand and say, no, that wouldn't work, because you can't predict the water will be exactly 5 miles an hour. There's going to be wind. And think about these things. Be skeptical a bit. We don't really teach that way. We just teach, come up with the same answer that everyone else would. Well, then you're just 1 in a billion.
But isn't that kind of controversial?
That's like being a follower instead of a leader. Some schools, like Montessori schools, get around, do some better job at that. But our whole system of schools is unfortunately very bad because it's based on money. And money, especially in a democracy, you got a problem. Schools all are funded by the government. The government has slices of pie that go into different sectors, usually according to how much money there is there or how many votes. For schools, kids don't get a vote. What that translates to is a family of 5 gets no more say than a family of 2. And the family of 2 doesn't want to spend money on schools. And the family of 5 does. So you've got this controversy where you're constantly outvoted by the masses. You didn't really, the kids don't get counted as a vote in determining how much money schools are. So schools are always going to be short of money. Short of money, it means you have to have a large class and everybody doing the same thing. You can't have any random, and I think randomness and even a little misbehavior is really essential to creative people. Steve understood it, and he knew how to listen to which people were telling the best stories. He couldn't quite design things. He wasn't quite an engineer level, but he was close to it because of his understanding of electronics. I don't think he ever wrote a program, but he understood the value of them. But at first, it was just mainly what could sell. He could compare to other devices, and he knew what would sell. He had worked selling in surplus stores, where all these little extra electronic parts came, and he would know how to buy some switches for 6 cents that he could sell to somebody for $6. Have a guy at the top. He's got to be good at sales. Sales is where your income comes from. But he should also be, if you got a guy at the top of a company that understands the technology and can talk to the engineers and not be totally lost and just say, you do what you're doing, I trust you. Yeah, that's good.
And I done went at it. Had to go serve a lot of drug addicts. Gotta turn the rolling into a patty. Flex the money like a nigga ain't happy. I just pray to God that all my tracks don't ever get no static, yeah. Cause if a nigga try to take what's mine, I gotta cause havoc, yeah. I spend my whole life chasing the bag and running from coppers. And a nigga been drowning myself in these codeine problems, yeah. Spend a couple thousand on my feet, then run it back up in a week, yeah. I got these Jordans on my feet till it get bloody underneath, yeah. Wanna feel the safer till it's buzzing on my jeans, dog. Cash rules everything around me, dog, yeah. I remember I was having no money, now I'm the richest in the yacht, shit. I had to take the safe up by the wall to put the faces in my pocket. I've been telling my bitches they just gotta play their position, hey. Blue faces in the roller, I've been crippin'. Remember days when I was down for a minute. Now a nigga blow 1,000 at Lenny. Doing everything they said that I didn't. At the layer and it's on the beginning. My name in the seats, they know it ain't renting. Wear my red bottoms like they Air Forces now. I'm the youngest, richest, flyest nigga.